So let me go ahead and get started. First of all, let me tell you all it's a pleasure to be here, kind of here and there, if you know what I mean. But the current focus on sustainability leads to the demand for system integration and interoperability, and that's the core of what BACnet's all about. Now, when you combine that with the fact that there's an aging workforce in building automation, the need for education, the need for workforce development is clear. At the same time, it's also clear there's a huge opportunity for careers and for people to build their expertise and become important contributors to this domain. So the work that you do in education and educating that workforce is really important, so I'm happy to be here and help that in any way that I can. I kind of planned for about a 45-minute sort of presentation with some following questions, but it's a little bit tricky because, well, one, it's remote, that always makes time a little difficult, but also I don't know your backgrounds exactly, so I'm going to try to tailor it to what I hope is the right thing, but by all means, stop me if you have questions, or stop me if I'm going in a direction that's not useful to you, because your time collectively is more valuable than mine right now, so let's make sure we make the best use of it. So with that introduction, let me give you a heads up on what it is that I'm thinking that we'll cover today. Okay? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on what is BACnet, why it matters, where BACnet comes from, and how you and through you, your students, can learn more about BACnet and how it might apply to your areas of study. Now, there are two quick things I want to do before I get started on this particular agenda. One is I'm going to jump to the end. So this is the last slide. And I want to show it to you now just so you know that it's coming. So there's no need to try to jot down URLs as you see them come and go on other slides. The resource page here will make available to all of you, so you'll have this. And you won't need to write that kind of stuff down. Instead, you can just sit back and focus on absorbing the parts of this that are most useful to you. The second thing I want to touch on is the content of this presentation was drawn from a lot of different presentations that I've done over the last 5 years or so, and pulled together and sorted specifically for this workshop. So you'll notice as we go through that there's framing from things we've done in China and Europe, here in the US. And I didn't put them all in one format because I thought it might actually be useful to recognize and reinforce the fact that BACnet really is a global solution. So with those two things out of the way, let me go ahead and get started. So what is BACnet? We'll start really simple, right? Building Automation and Control Network. It's a communications protocol, but it's specifically designed for building automation. And all that really means is that it's a set of rules by which devices in the building can communicate. Now, we all know that communication is basically simple, right? Like right here, I'm speaking, I see some technology magic, you're hearing, and everything I'm saying is perfectly clear, and you'll have it all in your head when we're done, all right? That's how communication works. Or maybe not, maybe not. I was in Chicago last week. I was talking to a group there, and I took our cab back to the airport. And that rush hour cab to the airport from Chicago downtown was a good hour ride, a little more. So I had a chance to chat with the cab driver. Turns out he was from Nigeria, and he wanted to talk about his experience in Nigeria and then his coming to the US. And one of the points he made is that while Nigeria is one country, it's actually pretty different people. It's divided by geography, sort of north-south kind of thing. It's divided by religion. It's still very tribal, so it's divided by tribes. And it's divided by language. There are lots of languages in Nigeria. So his point was that to communicate across the whole country is a bit of a challenge. And so they sort of settle on English as a way to bridge some of the gap. But in the end, that doesn't really solve the problem because they come from different contexts. They have different backgrounds. And so simply having a common language isn't really enough. And the reason it's not is because communication is not actually simple. In fact, communication is pretty complicated. And we don't think about it a lot because as we grow up, we learn it. But in fact, it is complicated. And when computers have to do it, or intelligent devices have to do it, they don't learn it growing up, at least not yet. So we have to teach it to them, which means we have to have very precise rules and a whole lot of them. So let me show you some of the pieces of the communication that computers have to get right. The first thing is they have to have the same messaging system, right? It's sort of like two people talking. If one is in the audio world and one's in the visual world, they're just not going to communicate at all. So let's say we agree on audio for a second, and we'll find that, well, that's still not quite enough. Because even within audio, you can have different media, right? You can have mechanical vibration on your little string, or you can have electromagnetic waves, frequency or amplitude variations, whatever. But unless you agree on that up front, you're not going to get what in the way of communication. So let's decide, just for the fun, let's pick electromagnetic waves and audio as the two first parts of our decision, and then move on from there. And it's still not good enough. Because now you have an encoding question. Right? You can do analog encoding, some kind of analog impression on electromagnetic waves, whether that's amplitude or frequency or something more complicated. But you can also have digital encoding, right? Just dots and dashes, do some more code. So unless you agree on the encoding along with the other two, you're still not going to get there. So as my kids used to ask when they were younger, are we there yet? And I would argue, no, we're not quite there yet, because we still have language to deal with. And across the world, there are a lot of languages. So if we're going to talk to people, we're going to have to choose one, and in some cases, we're going to have to translate one or both native languages to that common language. And that language translation is not so simple. As we talked about with my friends from Nigeria now, if you start with a simple statement, like paint the car red, and you translate that simple statement in French, right? Rouge. Well, that's paint the car red in French. But if you were to go and take that same thing and translate it back to English word for word, you get this. Paint the red car. Now, I don't know about you, but paint the car red and paint the red car don't sound like the same thing in English. So these kinds of grammar and semantics errors that happen between regular people happen between computers too. Unless you write rules that are sufficiently detailed and sufficiently comprehensive to cover them all. So that's what BACnet has to do. Right? BACnet has to cover all of that and more if it's going to be successful at getting devices that will develop completely independently and have them interoperate. So when we think about BACnet in terms of comprehensiveness, there are a couple different dimensions. One of those dimensions is simply that set of rules. Right? It actually specifies physical interconnection options, and there's lots of them. Because there's lots of different kinds of systems. There's large systems, there's small systems, there are local networks, there are broad networks, there are modular networks, there's the web. So a lot of different physical interconnection options have to be specified, and BACnet has a lot of them. Then there's network routing. How do you get the right message from one device to the correct next device, whether it's on a local network or a more extended network or a global network. And of course, there's data representation. Right? How do you want to represent data on the wire? Then there's that data exchange and semantics. What does it mean to send a particular thing or request a particular thing? BACnet also specifies specific actions that can be requested and responses that should come from those actions. So, for example, if you request to read a specific analog point, there's a well-defined response to that request in all the possible situations, ranging from here's what you asked for to it doesn't exist, to it isn't available, to maybe you don't really want it. And all of those things are part of that rules base that makes up BACnet. Of course, there's time and date representation and synchronization issues to be addressed, so there are rules for that. Error handling, because as good as software developers are, devices still have errors, need to be handled. And if they didn't, the network itself is going to have errors, just from noise insertion and things like that. Finally, there are security options. so that the level of security needed, the level of intrinsic security needed at least can be provided directly from the protocol itself. And then there are a set of rules about how you define what capabilities the device has. You know, what is the device profile, what has to be included to qualify for a profile, things like that. So all of that is a part of the BACnet. It defines the messages and the formats, and then the way the messages are carried from one place to another and routed from one place to another, and actually what they look like on the web. And you need all of that, or you can't have devices independently developed that will actually just work together. The BACnet is comprehensive in some other ways, right? It's system-wide. That is, BACnet's designed so you can have single-point devices that are BACnet, or embedded controllers, small embedded controllers that are BACnet, or supervisory controllers, or floor controllers, or building-wide workstations. So BACnet is designed with a lot of options so you can scale the solution to the size of the problem. And that's really important because buildings come in different sizes. Buildings come in different complexity. So if we're going to drive efficiency into all buildings, then we need a standard for data communications that can scale all the way down and all the way up. BACnet is also comprehensive in terms of kinds of equipment. Right? I mean, equipment comes with BACnet built in. Boilers, cooling towers, variable frequency drives, elevators, lights, valves. BACnet equipment is the backbone of building real systems. So a lot of the controllers and equipment that has built-in BACnet, BACnet provides a comprehensive set of solutions for a very broad part of the building infrastructure. Now another dimension in which BACnet is comprehensive is functionality. Right? The specific functionality of BACnet to deal with lighting, because lighting has certain attributes that need that. The same with access control, and with intrinsic security, and with fire safety, and elevators and escalators, and HVAC and power systems. So BACnet has messages and actions and responses designed specifically for all of these different sub-functions in a building. And then BACnet is comprehensive in one more dimension, right? Application-specific capabilities. Right? Along with those devices and being able to communicate that messages, it specifically addresses the question of how do you identify points and monitoring, and what does alarming look like, and notifications, and scheduling, and trending, and logging. They're designed in parts of BACnet to address all of these. And all of them at multiple levels, all of them scalable. From a simple little trend to a much larger trend. From a simple little alarm to alarms that need to be responded to, or alarms that repeat until they're responded to. So alarms written without acknowledgement, all those kind of things. And then local monitoring and control for power systems, and point grouping and control, where you want to control such as points together. So BACnet is comprehensive in all these different ways. The end result of that is that BACnet, if you actually went to read spec, is probably 15 or 1,600 pages of dense technical text. So I don't recommend that you do that. I don't recommend anybody does that. Just read it from beginning to end. The one person I knew who did that said it gave him headaches for weeks, and I'll believe it, because it's a complicated thing. Instead, the BACnet standard is really designed to serve as a reference document for developers of BACnet products. Users of BACnet, system integrators, technicians, those people need other information that's drawn from the specification. But going right to the specification is probably not a good solution for people other than those actually developing the spec itself and developing products around it. Now, because BACnet is comprehensive and does all those things, it gives the users some really important benefits. One, they get better specifications because when they say that they want this capability in a BACnet product, it's well defined exactly what that capability is. And they get faster, more accurate bit comparisons because all the devices have to meet exactly what that specification says. Because it's designed that they can be developed independently and work together, and integration time goes down, integration cost goes down. You want with a more reliable system because the committee that developed that specification has spent the time to figure out what can go wrong and design in protocol safeguards against those things. And we get a great deal of future proofing because the standard itself, as it develops, remains backward compatible. And from a user point of view, they get a broader stack control. Basically, people that understand BACnet and how to make use of it can move from one building to another building, or from one campus to another campus, and be equally comfortable. And at the end of the day, you just get more sleep and have fewer worries. Now, there are supplier benefits also, of course. Suppliers get better products in the sense that customer experience is improved because things just work together. Suppliers get lower costs because they don't need to develop that 1,600 pages themselves. Instead, it's collectively over the industry. And the people who are thinking about installing more complex systems with a lot of integration have more confidence, which drives a bigger market for sales, further sales cycles, all those things that suppliers want to have. Because it's a global standard, it also gives suppliers access to global markets. And it allows for specialty products. That is, it's possible for developers to develop just one little product that would go in a big system. They don't have to develop the whole system. Because if they make it BACnet, it'll plug into any big system. And finally, it makes staff flexibility to suppliers better also, in the same way it does to users. That once they have engineers and field service people who understand BACnet, they can work on lots of different systems, and it's all going to be consistent. Now, BACnet continues to evolve. It does not stop. Functional extensions that have been completed just in the last couple of years include interface for elevators and escalators and other kinds of lifts, color management for lighting, and great steps forward in security with encrypted data and authentication and soon authorization. So that is an evolving, growing, and dynamic specification because the need for buildings and building integration continues to grow and evolve over time. All right, so that's my summary of what is BACnet. I'm going to stop here just for a second. I didn't plan to, but I want to get a little feedback from you all. Am I on track? Am I covering what you want to hear? Is this making sense? Robert, help me out here.
I'm getting a bunch of nods from around the room. Everybody is agreeing that it's helpful and right on track for what.
Good, thank you.
You ask them to talk about the competition for students, are they still doing
So,
it?
why does BACnet matter?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Well, the first reason, especially the one probably most relevant to this workshop, is that building efficiency is a systems issue. And it doesn't matter how efficient your air conditioner is. If you're running it at the wrong time, or you're running it at the wrong setting, it's not an efficient building. So building efficiency is a systems problem, not just an equipment problem. The same is true with lighting, right? If you light a whole floor and run very efficient HVAC on a whole floor for one occupant, because you don't know where that occupant is, or more importantly, one part of your system knows about occupancy, but the other parts don't, that's not an efficient building. It doesn't matter how efficient the lights are. It doesn't matter how efficient the cooling or heating is. If it's not treated as a system, then it's not going to be an efficient building. And that applies to other functions too. Right? Running escalators between floors that are not occupied, that's an inefficient building. So why do it? Let's have escalators talking to occupancy and access control so they know when to run which ones. Same thing with something like closing ventilation off when it happens to be cool outside in some place, when you know it's going to be hot the next day. Rather than cooling the building down by using the outside ventilation more than you normally would, just for the sake of cooling for the next day. If you're not doing that at a systems level, then you can't get the most efficient building. So, building efficiency is a systems issue, which means integration is critically important. Because you can't have HVAC separate from lighting and separate from access control and separate from power management and separate from all the other building systems and make the whole building efficient. Now, integration is critical because building efficiency is a systems issue. But interoperability is essential for effective integration. And I say for effective integration because part of my background is engineering. I'm double E, I've done software, and I'm pretty darn sure there is nothing I can't integrate if you give me enough time and money. But as a practical matter, if we're going to integrate buildings at scale, we can't spend a whole lot of time and money on each system one at a time. We need to have integration that's effective, cost-effective, and functionally effective. To do that, we need interoperability. We need devices to just plug together so we can focus our time and energy on engineering the solution, not engineering interoperability. So by starting with devices that already interoperate, we get dramatic cost and time savings. But we also get minimum integration support over the system lifecycle. Because if you build custom integrations, then each time either end of that integration goes through a revision, you're probably going to be back fixing that integration. You don't have that problem with BACnet devices because as they evolve, they stay backward compatible across suppliers. Of course, you also get a broader supplier selection when you're dealing with interoperable BACnet world, which means you can pick the best product in each class regardless of what supplier it's coming from. And when you put in a system, and you come back in 2 years and want to extend it or expand it, you can do that without having to do custom integrations between the vendor who did the first one and the vendor who does the second one. In the same way, you can also get incremental integration. You can kind of design the system in a small starting point with a clear path for making it larger and more complex, and know that the devices you'll be able to buy in 2 years will plug into it. And because it's interoperable and the interfaces are defined, you can build reusable control strategies and monitoring and diagnostic strategies because you know you're going to be able to access certain kinds of information from any BACnet device in any building, anytime. So BACnet is the building automation system industry's standard for interoperability, which enables integration. And integration is what enables intelligence. Right? So we need to be able to integrate systems in order to get intelligent buildings. And there's good reason why we want intelligent buildings. Right? Some of the benefits of more intelligent strategies are things like enhancing grid stability. Right? When a building can be responsive to what the grid needs, then it can help outside its own building needs. It can help the larger grid, either by reducing power when the grid is peaking, or maybe providing on-site generation, or maybe even generating or using on-site storage to take excess power from the grid. But all of those things require in the building integration. Right? They require power monitoring and HVAC and lighting and on-site generation and storage to all be able to communicate together if they're going to do that effectively. So integration is what enables that intelligence. More current large-scale building evacuation protocols are starting to think about taking advantage of what elevators can do instead of just shutting them down. But to do that, elevators have to be integrated with life safety, access control, occupancy, and HVAC. So there's another intelligent function that you'd like to do, but you need integration to do it. Even the best occupant comfort requires integration. Right? Managing the lighting and HVAC together in a single zone based on occupancy requires those systems to talk to each other. And of course, energy efficiency requires integration. Right? To be responsive to both the current environment, inside and out, but also having sufficient integration to understand the likely future environment. What is tomorrow going to be? Numerous 4 hours from now going to be in terms of external environment or internal occupancy. Allow for more intelligent responses, but it requires integration. Now, another reason that BACnet is important is because it is the global standard for interoperability and integration. Right, this chart is taken from a report. The details are in here later where the report comes from, but it's a market study report showing that something like 60 or 65% of projects globally specify BACnet, alongside perhaps other solutions, but with BACnet as the integration platform for bringing together the different functions and capabilities in the building. And in the U.S., it's even more significant. The same study shows something like 80% of U.S. projects specify BACnet. So it's a significant part of the industry, and therefore needs to be appropriately involved in the curriculum for students at all levels of the institute. And I'll come back to appropriately in a minute, because it's not meeting the spec. We already covered that. So this slide is in here, you can look at it sometime. It says where the market study came from. For completeness, I can go there. All right, so that's sort of a high level why BACnet matters. I want to spend a little bit of time on where does BACnet come from? Right, where does it develop, and who pays attention to it, and who controls it? So basically, BACnet comes from a global community, a collective global community. Nobody owns it. It's a collective ownership. And that community includes building owner-operators, it includes architects, engineers, integrators, everybody involved with design and construction and operating a building, along with, of course, the building automation equipment and software suppliers. So it's a very large community, and there are a number of organizations that work together to serve that community. I'm going to talk about a few of them here going forward. So let me start with the fact that they're together for a reason. Right? These individuals and these organizations were formed around a common goal, which really is cost-effective multi-supplier building control integration. Right? Drive down costs, increase options, and enable suppliers and integrators to innovate with impact. Right? Before there was a BACnet, there was a lot of innovation in data communication protocols. So each one could be different. But that innovation didn't really drive any value to the user, because users don't just communicate, they need to accomplish some functional value out of it. So by giving a common protocol, suppliers and integrators can spend their time and engineering effort building value-added functionality to users. Through that process, the community expects to accelerate change to sustainable building operations, and of course accelerate the shift to intelligent building, smart cities. All of that is founded on having a common platform of integration. So where does it all come from? Well, the standard itself is written by, or was written by, is maintained by, extended by a committee inside ASHRAE. It's a standing standard project committee 135, which no one ever says that. They just say SSPC 135. But that committee looks at corrections to the standard when they're needed, to spend most of its time on extensions and additions to the standard. It's 30 plus technical experts, lots of working groups, we'll talk about that in a minute, thousands of hours a year, right? This group and its subgroups meet 4 times a year for practically a week, in addition to a lot of teleconference or these days video conference, weekly and bi-weekly sessions for the subgroups. And it's deliberately balanced, right? By design, and in fact by the rules around open standards, there are users, manufacturers, and general interest members who are voting members of that committee. And it has to be balanced. You can't have 47 manufacturers and 1 user and call that a standards committee. So there's a deliberate balance. There are also some visitors and liaison members who don't vote, but are there to provide technical expertise or to help bridge the gap between the standard itself and the community that needs to use it. So, for example, I'm a liaison member to SSP 135, as are numerous other people who want to connect different organizations and parts of the BACnet community together. Now, SSPC 135 has a number of working groups that are really targeted at specific parts of the data communications challenge. The ones that are currently active are the ones I'm showing here. Right? Network security is a big one right now, as is information technology, data modeling, and semantic interoperability. Elevator Group just released a year or 2 ago the core elevator functionality, and they continue to extend that. Lighting applications, object services, protocol stack are kind of the infrastructure people. And then smart grid and testing and interoperability have been around for quite a long time, continue to be active. So all of these groups are off doing work under the auspices of the 135 committee, which reviews everything and eventually votes it into the standard or sends it back to committees for more work. And then the standard comes out of ASHRAE, goes to ANSI as an American national standard, then goes to ISO to make it a global standard, and then ISO is the fountain, if you will, from which other countries and regions create their own standards. So the SEN European standard for BACnet is essentially a copy of the ISO standard, which is essentially a copy of the ANSI standard, which is essentially a copy of the ASHRAE standard. So it's the same all the way through. That's how it gets from being an ASHRAE standard to a global standard and then down to individual countries and regions. For promotion and education, there are a number of groups that work on that. BACnet International is one of them. There are also some BACnet interest groups, the most prominent being the BACnet interest group in Europe. And they're structured a lot like BACnet International, in fact. BACnet International itself has 180 corporate members and about 10,000 individual members. And along with the work we do directly, we also administer and support two of the other organizations, the BTL group and BACnet Institute, that I'll talk about in just a minute. So promotion and education directly under BACnet International includes trade shows and trade press, as well as annual awards and webinars and other things to raise awareness and interest. And then actual educational content. We have a monthly newsletter, this is kind of general interest one, printed journal is a little bit more deeper and technical, the conference presentations and webinars and other resources designed to help people understand BACnet and figure out where it fits in their world. Now, the organization focused on testing and certification is called the BACnet Testing Laboratory, and it goes by this little mark here, the detail mark. Let me talk about that one a bit. We know why we need testing and certification, right? I mean, we already went through this. It's not really simple to communicate. And the BACnet standard is large and technical. And while the requirements are there and they're specific, they're subtle sometimes. And everybody in the community benefits from having easy integration. That's sort of the whole point of BACnet, is to make for easy integration. So there's a desire and an intent to drive that as much as we can to be easy, and that means that the standard has to be implemented correctly in every product. So that's what testing and certification is designed to do. The tests for BACnet are a companion standard, right? There's a standard for BACnet. There's another standard right next to it, which is the test standard. And that's where the basic tests live. And they're developed by the BACnet committee and by the BTL working group, which I'll talk about in just a second. But the BTL working group itself is what generates the test package, and that's the formal set of documentation by which products are tested. So the BTL working group is the active working group inside BTL, and it operates under the direction of both BACnet International and the EU. And it basically defines and publishes everything you need to know to test BACnet products officially. And they call that collection of documents a BTL test package. So it draws from the ISO test specification, it draws from interoperability requirements, and it includes testing policies. And then the BTL also designs and oversees the process for independent testing. That is the recognition of individual labs as well as the process by which a product gets tested and certified. And it's a process that's open to any inspection. The certification process basically just takes test definitions and policies to an independent test lab that's been recognized. Supplier sends their product there. And depending on the product, there's some 300 to 3,000 tests on that product, which generates a formal test report in a structured format, which is then audited by BTL. And based on a successful audit, provides the opportunity for a manufacturer to put the BTL mark on their product, and also results in the product being posted in the certified product listing. So identification of a tested product is easy. It either has the mark on it, and or you can find it on the BTL listing at that particular URL, which is also on that last page, so you don't need to write it down. In addition to conformance, there's also interoperability testing organized by the supplier community along with the rest of the BACnet community, so that in addition to knowing we have conformance, we also know that they actually work together. And people can from there both build tools to enhance integration, but also validate the standard and the test platforms. Of course, there are a lot of benefits to users using tested products. But if they don't do that, they're going to have to bring products together in their own lab and test them to make sure they work before they put them in buildings. They don't need to do that if they're ETL marked. And it speeds up integration and commissioning because there are a lot of subtle errors that happen in products that aren't obvious and will show up at commissioning time and cause everyone to stop and start trying to debug things rather than just trying to integrate things. It also allows for more reliable system expansion. A lot of products have capabilities that aren't used at first install. And you want to make sure those things work and they'll be available to you years later when you want to implement those. It's important that they be conformance tested before you start. Because nothing in commissioning tests functionality that's not used. But you might want that functionality to be available for some future expansion. So again, users could get fewer worries and more sleep. So some closing thoughts on testing and certification. There's no question that BTL tested products reduce integration time and cost. But back-end implementation still needs to be designed, right? I mean, a poorly designed system is going to perform poorly, whether it's BACnet or anything else. So there still has to be a system design around mechanical systems, electrical systems, fluid systems, so that the actual system is capable. And then BACnet can be the integration platform that allows us to take full advantage of that. That means users need to be clear about their requirements, and consulting engineers need to know how to specify BACnet in a way that gets those requirements met. And of course, integrators and technicians need to be trained in how to actually implement systems to those specifications. All right, education and information. So this is focused on the BACnet Institute because its whole purpose is to provide education and information. And it's accessible to anyone, including all of you and all of your students, and it's free. And it has three fundamental components. It has an e-learning courses segment, it has a curated searchable library, and it has a community forum. As of the moment, or as of a couple of months ago, there were 6,400 registered users and still adding about 100 users a month. And it can award accredited CEUs for people that need them, like consulting engineers. So I have a few slides here I'll walk through to show you. Well, I'll tell you what, rather than slides, I'll actually try a live demo. Now, those of you that have done live demos in your labs probably know better, but I'm going to try it anyway. So let me stop this screen share for a second. And let me switch to a different screen share. Let's see, where are we? Oh, there we are. All right. So Robert, I'm going to trust that you'll tell me if this didn't work, but in theory, you're seeing the BACnet Institute now.
Yep, you're running.
Okay, still got nodding heads there, or did they go to sleep?
Yeah, mixture of both.
All right, so the BACnet Institute has these three components, right? Courses, resources, and community. And you can get to them that way. You can get to them down here, too, if you're looking at community use and activities and most popular things. So let me show you courses for a second. So there are currently 3 on-demand, self-paced courses, all of which are capable of awarding CEUs, because they come both with a course, internal quizzes, and a closing test. Now, the BACnet Basics course is the most popular one. It probably has about 4,500 enrollments by now. Let me show you what's in it. So all the courses start with a title and a description and learning objectives, of course. And a little bit about CEUs and PDHs. And BACnet Basics, down here at the bottom, shows the 6 subclasses in it, the 6 sub-lessons, right? So there's a lesson on the business case for BACnet, systems integration with BACnet, the functionality available through BACnet, BACnet product descriptions, and then ensuring conformance to BACnet, and then some field-proven specification tips. And then there's the sort of mastery test at the end. So this is the BACnet Basics course, and this is a really good overview course for pretty much anyone in the industry. because it sort of introduces BACnet at a level that's high enough for most anyone to grasp it and understand why it might be important or relevant for them. The other two courses in here, BACnet device profiles, are really for specifiers, and facility manager's guide to building automation systems is targeted at facility managers or people who aspire to that role. Resources is this curated library, so there's probably 180 or so documents, presentations, videos in here, which have been collected and vetted and sorted. So you can filter on them. For example, if you want to look specifically at ones that are tagged with integrated systems, then you find all these here. You can sort of go through them and pick them out, and do the details of them. Like this one here, we'll take a look at it. You can find out that it is a video presentation, was given at AHR Expo 2018. So you know you're going to see a conference presentation on a video, basically. Or maybe you want to come down here and see what kind of interoperability resources there are. And again, you'll find a whole bunch of them. So you're starting with IoT things and moving down into basics and beyond, success stories, best practices. Or maybe you want to see instead something else down here. You want to see more about networking particularly. So there you'll find some things on IP infrastructures and physical connectivity. So if you went to one of these, you'd find a lot more detail on all the specific physical options, physical media options in BACnet. So that's available. And then the community section over here is community forums. And the public forum here, BACnet Community Forum, you can wander down and find recent questions. Or you can say, you know what, I really have some questions about MSTP and I don't want to ask one, I just want to look around and see what's here. So if you do that, then you'll find there's a discovery question from someone, there's a what to do when you're losing communications too often with MSTP kind of question. So there's a lot of different kinds of questions in here. But we curate this question and answer functionality with a couple of BACnet experts. So if you submit a question, you're going to get an answer that's valid, because you make sure of it. So that's the BACnet Institute. As I say, it's a design resource for all different levels of expertise at all different places in the value chain of building automation systems, and it's free for all of them. All right, good. I'm going to go back to the presentation mode now. Let me try that. Okay. I'm guessing we're back. So let me skip through the slides that we're going to talk about the Institute, because we did that. Here's a summary of the global organization, right? Ongoing development is basically SSPC. Promotion, education, and community starts with the BACnet Institute, and then BACnet International, and then other BACnet interest groups. And testing and certification is handled by BTL. One last thing I wanted to mention is ongoing development. Right? There's still a lot of work being done on BACnet. Some of the recent extensions have been in lighting control, load control, elevators, there's IPv4, IPv6, Zigbee. These have all been added to the original specifications. It's been a very active, evolving community over the last 20 years. The most recent one being BACnet SC, right? Encryption and authentication at the message level. Current work includes ontologies and semantic tags to allow more interesting data analytics with less work in mapping things, security certificate management, and authorization. So all of those are currently going on. We've talked about sort of the user benefits of BACnet. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but just point out that having a roadmap of where the technology is going and a public roadmap supported by a public volunteer committee provides a very stable platform. This is my last pitch for benefits here. I'm going to skip past these because we've seen them all in my 45 minutes. It's just about up here. So this is the slide I promised you when we began. All right, so There's a monthly general interest newsletter on BACnet you can sign up for at BACnetinternational.org. There's a biannual journal which goes a little deeper into topics than the Cornerstones newsletter. And you can also find that at BACnetinternational.org. The self-paced courses and the articles and videos and presentations I showed you already are at BACnetinstitute.org. And the forums there as well. There are also 43 videos on youtube.com/BACnet International. And the certified product listing, you must see the actual product listing for all the products, is at BACnetlabs.org. All right, so that's sort of my overview of BACnet and why it matters and how it works. And if you have questions and stuff, I'm happy to respond as best I can.
Awesome. Thank you for that presentation, Andy. We already have one question that came up partway through. Are you still doing the BACnet competition for students?
There is a current competition. The only current competition I'm aware of is in Europe, and that is a post-grad thesis competition. But we are certainly open to proposals for how to do a relevant BACnet competition here in North America. So I'd be more than happy to hear from anyone who wants to suggest how we might do that and how it might be framed.
Could you give us an idea of what competitions have run in the past?
In North America, we've done competitions for a variety of things, but not students specifically. We've done them for successful projects, we've done them for innovation in products, we've done them for volunteer activities, we've done them for a variety of things like that. But I don't remember doing a student competition here in North America.
For what?
I've only been involved since 2003 or 4, so I could go back further to that, I suppose.
There's some robot programming or something, I remember, probably 10 years ago.
So our faculty member thinks it was something about robot programming about 10 years ago, something mobile or something like that?
Well, that's interesting. I've personally been involved in student competitions around robots because I was a judge for FIRST Robotics for a number of years and for VEX Robotics for a number of years. If there's a BACnet one, I wasn't part of it, which is somewhat disappointing. If there was one, I would like to have been.
Well, food for thought, something to look into.
Yeah. Well, we actually are in the process of thinking about how we can best engage with educators and students. For exactly that reason I started with when we talked about the very beginning, right? The need for more and better trained, actually. People at all levels of expertise in the building automation systems world is clearly going to be a growing need. And it's already a serious need. It's only going to get more significant. So anything we can do to help promote that, we want to do. We have really just in the last 6 months gotten more engaged in trying to understand what's already existing to see where we can usefully contribute to that.
Excellent. Other questions so far? Connie?
The semantic part of it, was where is BACnet going as far as, like, we heard about haystack, and was it brick that,
So you're talking about the tagging?
uh-huh.
Can you elucidate a little bit, Andy, on where BACnet is headed with their semantic tagging?
Yes. I'm not an expert, so I can be a real expert as well. But at a high level, the general direction is creating within the building automation world a clear ontology to guide tagging. And the ontology is being developed by a committee called 223T, which is specifically formed for that purpose. But it's the same people, and it's under the auspices of the BACnet committee. So it's very related. The direction of that group thus far has been to use haystack what's the right word? The haystack tags and tag architecture. But the haystack ontology is maybe not broad enough to cover the building automation requirements. So the work is going on, but I think the intent is to bring haystack into it as a piece of the final puzzle along with brick.
Excellent, thank you. Other questions?
Robert.
Larry.
Now, I have a question about the trending of local adoption.
Okay.
Right. And I wanted to hear more about the percentage and how that was determined. Is that based on the number of new controls projects?
Gotcha.
Right, or some other metric?
Great question. So Andy, what we've got here is a question on the that graph you showed for the trending of adoption. How was that information derived? Was that based off of solely new buildings being built or existing buildings or et cetera?
That was a building automation project global market study by BACnet, which is a market research firm out of the UK, which has been doing building automation annual studies for a couple decades. But it's focused on building automation projects, and that's going to be both new buildings and old ones.
Excellent, thank you. Other questions?
What's your favorite BACnet discovery tool?
So this is kind of an esoteric question here, Andy. What is your favorite BACnet discovery tool?
I don't think I heard that question right?
You probably did. So what is your favorite BACnet discovery tool? What company?
Oh, I don't have a favorite. And the reason I don't is one, because I don't have to use one. I don't actually do what you and your students might want to do. So I have to call my favorite one because I don't use them personally. I also believe that the ones that exist, these ones I'm familiar with, they're all a little different because they come from a different perspective on both the user that will use them and the problem that they're trying to solve. So from my perspective, it might even depend on exactly who you are in terms of your own experience and skill set and exactly what you're trying to do and what will fit the best. Is that sufficiently esoteric as an answer?
That was a very diplomatic answer. I appreciate it. Other questions? Peter.
How does BACnet pay the bills?
So how does BACnet pay its bills?
Well, the BACnet committee is a volunteer group. So everyone on the BACnet committee that's doing technical work has a day job. Because no one pays them to be on the BACnet committee other than their day job people who want to see BACnet progress. So the manufacturer representatives on that committee are paid by their companies. Right? The general interest people, they're paid probably by the organizations that they work with. And then there are some like NIST, who is represented there, who get paid by the government. But no one gets paid by the committee, and it's not an active committee. Now the other groups, the BACnet International Group, the BCL, the BACnet Institute, the EU Europe, the other bigs, those groups all get revenue from a variety of sources. BACnet International in particular, those 180 corporate members pay specific dues to be a part of it. There's a fee involved for getting products tested. There's a separate fee involved for having them certified and listed. So there are a couple of sources of revenue for the supporting organizations around the BACnet committee. But the BACnet committee itself, no one gets paid beyond.
Fantastic. Thank you. Other questions?
Robert? Yeah, how are the continuing education courses developed?
So, Andy, can you tell us how your continuing education courses are developed?
Yes, painfully, that's how they're developed. I have a far greater appreciation for curriculum development after doing those courses than I had before. But the process is straightforward. It's a lot more work and a lot more cost than I would have guessed to put together a good online self-paced learning experience. But essentially what we did in each case was we got experts together with a learning expert, an online learning expert in particular, to talk through what did we want to accomplish, what were the learning objectives that we wanted, and therefore what content had to be included, and some thoughts about how to do that. And then we had a development team, much smaller team, just a couple people, try to put together outline and more detailed content work. And then had a professional course developer take that and try to work it into an online distributable platform, if you will. So using whatever, I forget what tools they use now, but they had, bringing in content and imagery and then the infrastructure for things like quizzes and tests, and building all that into a platform accessible module, essentially. It took us about 9 months for each of them. Actually, the first one took longer because we really kind of had to learn our way along. But something like 9 months, and I can say they're more expensive than we thought. We're actually migrating a bit from that to shorter video snippets. So for BACnet security, for example, there are 3 8-minute kind of videos up on our YouTube channel that sort of go together as a starting point for talking about BACnet SC and security. And those are the ones that we did as sort of an alternate model, where we're trying to do an hour, 2 or 3 hour online course. Part of our thought around online courses now that we've done a couple, is they have to have a long-term staying power, or they're just not cost-effective. They can't be topics that change so fast that you have to change that content frequently.
Excellent.
Did I answer your question, or is there more to it than that?
No, I think that answered the question pretty well. Other questions?
Can I add one comment to my own?
What was that, Andy?
Anybody that wants to help us do more of those, I'm open to that thought.
So we got some chuckles, but honestly, I think you probably have some interest here in the room. So if someone was interested in helping you out towards that end, do they just reach out to BTL via email, or how would they go about that?
The best way is to send me an email at ndm@bacnetinternational.org.
Doesn't get much easier than that.
Yeah. We'll sign up for
I like
our
it simple when I can.
All right. Other questions?
Okay, you guys know, I would be fun calling some of you people if I could actually see you, so this remote thing is good for you. I'll catch up with you eventually.
We don't doubt it. We don't doubt it. Other questions?
I'll bring a camera next time.
All right, Andy, I think that has closed out our questions. So unless you have any closing remarks?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, I'm interested in supporting the kind of work that you're doing in any way that you can. And hopefully at some point I'll see some of you in live person in one of the many places we all wander around.
I think that's pretty inevitable. They know your face now, so the next time you end up at a conference that they're at, I wouldn't be at all surprised if you didn't see some of these folks.
That'd be great.
So, thank you so much for your time today, Andy. We really appreciate it, and especially the information towards those resources. I guarantee those will get used by the folks in this room. So, thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. Have yourselves a great rest of your workshop.
Thank you, Andy. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.